To share a little bit about Fred, because I thought Fred was he's been a great member of our club Saturday Morning Live. Been a Toastmaster not a real long time, but I first met Fred about 6 or 7 years ago, I think, when he first joined Toastmasters in Rochester, and we were in the same club together for a short period of time, the Humor Us Toastmasters. And I recall knowing that Fred was sort of a quiet guy, but sort of a quiet guy waiting to have his voice, exposed, and his humor. He has sort of an understated humor, but when he said something funny, everybody laughed, and sometimes it was a smile, unknowing smile. And so he really worked hard, as evident to all of the Toastmaster accomplishments that he's had in the last number of years. He's had numerous accomplishments. In fact, I think he recently got a big award at the district for the number of awards he's gotten year to date so far, educational awards. So he really worked hard at this craft. And I know he worked hard a lot in his life. He shared with me a number of times some of the things that he worked at. I believe, I'm not really sure what his job title was, but I know that he retired as, I think it was an engineer. He was a professional person. And early on, he had shared with me some of the struggles he had being misdiagnosed with a certain illness and being on the wrong medications. And he had shared with me that after I gave a speech about my brothers who had mental illness. And so it was a really bonding moment when he was sharing with me some of his struggles that he had. But yet at the same time, he found Toastmasters as a way he could at least learn to share some of that and channel that energy. And I did know that he experienced some pain, physically, some of his, some medical conditions. But he kept coming on. He was at our club last month. Just really 3 short weeks ago, taking part. He's an evaluator at the club. He worked hard at that. He brought in guests. And one of the most touching things that Fred did when I was first starting to get to know him, and after I'd given that speech about my brothers, he was sharing with me some of the artwork that he had done, and he had shown some of it at one of our club meetings. And I was just so impressed. It was digital artwork that he had worked at, and it was so impressive. He had this gift in his self that he really wanted to share, so he worked at it online, and he gave me a couple of those, and I have them at home someplace, and I'm not sure where they're at. But it was so touching that he gave those to me, and he sent a couple by email, and he was really proud of his work, and that he knew that his Toastmasters family really appreciated everything that he brought to life. And I will miss Fred, and I'll miss Fred personally, on a personal level, and we'll look forward to seeing him again sometime.
When Fred joined this club a couple of years ago, he was a great addition to not only Saturday Morning Live, but just Toastmasters around here in general. One thing I appreciated about Fred the most was when Toastmasters really works well is when your evaluation team, as we do here, when people really give you good advice, when they really look critically at the speech you've just given. And I just think back to just 3 weeks ago when I spoke and Fred was on the evaluation team. He gave a lot of very good advice, almost to the point where his entire evaluation was that way. And I took a lot of that and was able to rework my speech, and I can't wait to give it again. But the thing that reminds me, I think about Fred the most right now, is the fact that just the day before he passed, he emailed me with a thought on my speech, a quote that I could use, and a very powerful one that will really make it better, and wished me luck and told me how strong of a presentation it was and how much he appreciated the fact that I gave it. Things that didn't even lend itself well to that 2 to 3 minutes we gave him up there, but it'll stick with me and remind me that not only does he take the time when you're speaking to do the evaluation, but he actually thinks about it and thought about it afterwards enough to say, I got to send that quote to Tim and let him know how that could help his speech. So it went beyond the room in the meeting. He carried Toastmasters with him everywhere he went, and is evident in all the clubs he was at. And he'll be sorely missed, not just here, but I'm sure in every club he belonged to.
When I heard about the loss of Fred, I was sitting at my computer, just going through my emails, sorting through them. I had been in Florida for 4 days, 5 days. And so when I came back, I had a lot of stuff just to sort through and kind of check out. And Robbie's email caught my eye very dramatically because of the title. And I knew that I had lost someone who was part of my world. I wasn't a close friend to Fred. I didn't know him outside of our club. I didn't know him a long time, but he was part of my life. And he was part of my daily life, and I valued that. He was part of our officers group, and certainly a capable evaluator. And though he spoke with a very soft voice, his evaluations were very strong. And I remember, probably it was the evaluation, Tim, that you're talking about, that I remember thinking, oh, at some point that he had made, because it was a very, very effective bit of feedback that he had offered during that evaluation session. I admired that he would drive all the way from Rochester to our officers' meetings that start before club starts, when I struggle with thinking Burnsville is a stretch. And he and Joe would get out in the winter, crack of dawn, who knows, made sure they were here. He had a commitment to the club, he kept the commitment to the club, and he reinforced us as best he could with his thoughts and ideas. And eternal rest, Fred. God bless your soul. You will be missed.
I'm also impressed, as Mary said, that driving all the way from Rochester and coming to the meeting, being very committed to the club and the officers group was really something. The first thing that came to my mind when I got the news was his speech, The ABCs of Retirement. And that's what I did. I went and I looked at the speech. Thankfully, we recorded the speech here at Saturday Morning Live, and it is part of our main page as well as the Facebook page. So if you get a chance to remember him, the humor side. And the reason I bring that up is because that speech showed that Fred had many, many qualities, and I did not know he was a humorous speaker. The other qualities I really admired was always keeping the bar high. I mean, the rest of us would try to get 2 or 3 awards, at the most 3 awards every year. He had 15 or 16 competing with other Toastmasters for that number, and that is why he was recognized last year. Another memory I have of Fred is the last meeting when we had our panel evaluation. He was on the panel in which he and myself, we shared the panel evaluation as we evaluated Tim's speech. So that is going to be, I guess, a very special memory that I was at least part of the panel evaluation in which I and Fred got to share something. Fred also, even though he passed away, he donated his body to Mayo Clinic for further research. I did not know that something like this even existed. That got me and Catherine thinking about what we could do in future, because he did lead a way in that regard. So I'm going to really miss him as a quiet but surprising person and a very dedicated Toastmaster.
I'm going to go next. I think that's me. The one thing I want to mention about Fred is that I don't recall my speech that I had done, but it was in regards of touching someone by sending a note. And he stopped me afterwards and talked about his digital printing and actually photography that he had done. And 2 days later in the mail, I had got a whole stack of his cards that he takes his photography and puts them on note cards. And he sent me the whole stack of cards so that it ties in with my speech of actually being able to send out to people. And further meetings that we've had, he has shared with his new digital venture that he just started, where he now has those on the note cards. And so I just, have those. I did use them, but now I might repurpose them to some degree, because the digital ones, the actual photography ones, are beautiful. So he will truly be missed in our club.
Fred Domnick is the positive attitude with which he approached everything. He was always calm and cheerful. Just remember, his calming, smiling presence at our meetings, and that he's helpful. He was always asking himself, what can I do to help? So, and always finding something that he could do to help that really, really was needed.
This last few weeks have been a strange time. I've lost 3 people who, in one way or another, were important in my life, and there's a certain reaction that I see that's the same for all, but especially strong for Fred. I tend to be pretty much wrapped up in my individual pursuits, a little bit of a loner, very focused on my family, I suppose. And when something like this happens, there's a reaction that says, if I had got to know this person better, I'd had something really more rich in my life that I don't have. But I don't think I'm talking about trying to change myself, because it's kind of late for that. I am what I am, and if I'm an introvert, it's because I chose to be. But when I think about Fred, it's so obvious that I got to know him just well enough to know that he was a man that would have been very good to know much better. And there's no escaping that. Just real regret that for me it never happened. But because of that, if nothing else, that sort of selfish thing, I'll really miss him. I wish he was still here. And of course, keep him in our minds and wish him well in his new life.
I met Fred several years ago when I was president of a club in Hudson, Wisconsin. And we met even earlier than Saturday Morning Live does. We met always at 7 o'clock in the morning. And for Fred to get up and be able to meet at that time, he did it twice, which was something that the district recommends, that you meet with each club twice. I think one of the things that he enjoyed most was the fact that this was not a club that he was going to have to nurture in any way. I think he just enjoyed the fun that he got when he came to the club, because we are in Hudson, the club specifically is very friendly and invites everyone who comes to the meetings to actually join us. And I think he might have done that, except for the commitment would have been just more than he was willing to take, given his situation at the time. One of the things that I remember recently was that what a total surprise Fred was. He took over as treasurer of Saturday Morning Live from me. And as an officer, you think you're going to have to help that person be and guide them in what the duties and so forth are. Fred, what he did is he graciously took that off my plate completely and just kind of took over and did it in such a gentlemanly way that I was so relieved and grateful for his communication, for his willingness to step forward, first of all, to take that treasurer's job, which is quite a commitment, but more importantly, to take on the tasks and duties it means to transfer everything. And he managed to do that gracefully and graciously. And he made me feel like I had been an important part of the officers team, but he was willing to take over now. And that was a surprise, because Fred is kind of quiet, and so I was pleased to say that he influenced me in some ways because of that kindness and that graciousness.
Yes, I found Fred to be a real inspiration. I mean, he talked about some of the problems that he had with his misdiagnosis and that mental health system. There are some real issues, and he had some real struggles, and yet he took it in stride and when he gave a speech, he put his finger on an area that he thought was really needed to be repaired. And then, as I read in the newspapers a few weeks later, he was right. And I think he takes the initiative, I mean, to come all the way up here from Rochester, very few people would do that. And really, he wants to take the positive track, and he was so helpful. He was so much of an educator, you know, and helped so many people out. And as we were talking about Fred, I was just looking out the window and watching a bald eagle soaring around, and I thought that, yeah, Fred's up there now soaring with the eagles, and I miss him.